Where does Wisconsin fit in the new tiers if we're talking all the new programs coming into the Big Ten? We're going to talk about that now on Locked On Badgers.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome to Locked On Badgers. We got Rajiv over there. Always welcome. Welcome to everybody that's listening. I'm Ryan Herrings, the host of Locked On Badgers, your team every single day. And we're going to just keep talking this Big Ten expansion because it's pretty fascinating, quite frankly, for a conference we've followed our entire lives. And our first topic here, Rajiv, where does Wisconsin fit? We're talking about tiers. Where do they fit in a tier in the new Big Ten? We both ranked out our Big Ten tier programs. Rajiv, why don't you talk about the criteria we're using here? Because this could be sliced a lot of ways, so we should be specific what we're looking at.
Totally. And even between us, we've went back and forth a couple of times on how to do it. So the way I'm looking at it is this, like in the the most recent era, the last 10 years, football programs, where do these teams kind of rank? So it gives us an idea of how they've been recently, but also kind of like where they stand right now. And interestingly enough, where do Oregon and Washington and the other West Coast teams fit into that tier? And how does it affect Wisconsin? So I'm looking at kind of the last 10 years of football programs.
And I went just a little bit further because we had a little gray area to what matters to us to some degree. Now, football is still what we're talking about here. We're not really factoring in we're definitely not factoring in academics. We're not factoring in the Olympic sports.
We're not even basketball, really.
I was going to say, we're not really talking basketball either.
Yeah.
For me, I'm going a little further back in football, and I'm also looking a little bit what they're going to look like, not just this next year, but where I think they're going to be over the next 5-10 years potentially. All right, with that, let's start. Ryan Eller says, live show before last call. Let's get weird. Let's get a couple comments in here to start with. Robert Sorensen said, wow, an early show. It's 11 o'clock where I live.
We do sometimes do, I love it because I'm on West Coast time, so 8 o'clock right now is great. Sometimes we do them a little later, but this is pretty good.
Mm-hmm. Adam Otto says, let's go. Logan Couch says, well, Wisconsin will give Washington and Oregon a rude welcome to the Big Ten, just like we did to Nebraska, Maryland, and Rutgers. There's no welcome like Nebraska welcome.
That was amazing. Which has a lot to do with my rankings, by the way.
Tyler Strieber says, let's go. Really do appreciate everybody commenting. Let's get Tyler's rankings in here first, and we're going to do ours. He's got Tier 1, Ohio State, Michigan, USC. Tier 2, Penn State, Wisconsin, Oregon, Washington, Iowa. Tier 3, UCLA, Michigan State, Nebraska. Tier 4, everyone else. I like it because it kind of is like, who cares about that bottom tier to some degree, right?
Totally.
And he just kind of lumped it all together.
Totally.
Tyler, thank you for that. Ours aren't going to be that dissimilar. I do see a few differences I already have from yours, Tyler. Rajiv, let's get into our Tier 1, and we also rank these tiers in order, right? So we have our Tier 1, and then we rank the schools inside the Tier 1 as well. Mm-hmm. So, Rajiv, why don't you kick this off? Who do you have Tier 1? How do you have that ranked?
So Tier 1 for me is Ohio State, Michigan, USC. I mean, I really don't think it's hard to argue. I think Tyler's similar. I think it's really hard to argue the top three teams. These guys are all championship contenders, consistent championship contenders. They have, 5-star recruits. They're always in the top 10. This is like the upper echelon. Basically, the teams in the conference right now and over the last, 10 years that basically are championship worthy.
Yep. I have the same group. I have Ohio State 1. I really wanted to go USC 2, Michigan 3, just because I think USC is a higher upside with all the talent around them coming into the Big Ten. I think they're going to be a recruiting juggernaut. But just based on what Michigan's done the last couple of years, I'm going Ohio State, Michigan, USC. That's my Tier 1 as well.
And I would add on there that I know that some people might think if last 10 years, Michigan they were down a little bit, but man, like Michigan is still Michigan, right? Like they may have had some down years, especially like the Rich Rod era, but this is a team and Harbaugh's been there for quite some time now. This is a team that really is still Michigan, however you cut it up.
Let's also point this out. Michigan didn't if you remember when Jim Harbaugh was hired, people thought, because he was coming off that pedigree that he had with the 49ers, with Stanford, they thought that was going to be an instant national championship team, and it didn't happen. But they weren't bad. Like Harbaugh's teams weren't Rich Rod's teams.
No. Rich Rod was on a different level.
Yeah. So it was fine. Tier 2 is actually where I think Rajiv and I are going to start to differentiate here. I have Penn State in Tier 2 by itself. So for me, Penn State is in a tier higher than Wisconsin, Oregon, Washington. They just have a higher upside. They have a bigger history. I think they have more recruiting ability around them. I think their facilities and just their ability to sell their program is at a higher level than any other school outside of the top three. But I don't think they're in that top 3 range. So I kind of created a separate tier for Penn State. I have them at number 2 based on their upside and their recruiting ability.
Yeah, I lumped them into my tier 2. Penn State is I'm almost sour on Penn State. I always kind of am because I think we get compared to them often, and I agree they're ahead of us. So Penn State is the beginning of my tier 2. Then I go Oregon because, look, I mean, I don't like Oregon. Obviously, they're a West Coast team. I have some friends who, my old neighbor is a big Oregon fan, and we always are talking trash to each other about Oregon and Wisconsin. But they're good. They are, and they've been a nationally relevant team for quite some time. They've played in the playoff. They're obviously a very good team. Best years back in the Chip Kelly days, but they've had fantastic quarterbacks: Justin Herbert, Marcus Mariota. I mean, they've got a long list of people. So historically, they're just there. Then I have Wisconsin. Then I have Iowa, because I do think we're right there in that second tier. But it's interesting because instantly you have 2 teams now, USC and Oregon, that just basically just inserted themselves right on top of us. And that's more work that we have to do to win the conference. It's exciting that way, right? I mean, it's nice to have to work hard, but also it's just made the Big Ten that much more difficult. So tier 2, Penn State, Oregon, Wisconsin, Iowa.
Okay, yeah. So it's interesting to me that you don't have – I have a bigger tier 3, which is really like your tier 2. Right, because I have Penn State and so on. So I have Oregon as well. I have Oregon heading up ahead of Wisconsin. Then I have Wisconsin coming in number 2 in tier 3. Then I have Washington. Then I have Iowa, Nebraska, UCLA. I know I can already see you hating my Nebraska.
Gosh, honestly, have you watched them in the last since they've entered this conference? They have been. I mean, look, Ryan. I understand. Like back in the Big 12 days, this is the Big 10. Literally, the day they stepped in this conference, they have been nonsense. They have been crap.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, really, like they've not been good at any point in their time in the Big Ten, which I believe started in 2011. That's 12 years. How can you put them anywhere near the upper echelon of this?
No, listen, every single thing you said there is correct.
It's true.
It's fact. It's factual, right? Everything you said there. Here's the thing, though. Here's the thing with Nebraska that I think people still sleep on. The right coach kickstarts that program. That program, there's not many programs since the 90s that have won multiple national titles. That program still sells out every game. That program is an NIL monster. That program has incredible facilities, one of the top 3 or 4 facilities in the Big Ten. They just have had this ridiculously terrible stretch of bad hires, but again, it's like, you know what they are? They're like that incredible sports muscle car that's left in the garage in somebody's dusty barn in Indiana for 20 years. And then the right guy comes along, fixes it up, and it's the most incredible ride on the streets. I think they have an incredible upside with the right coach because I think the history and the pedigree, the facilities, and the financial commitment is there.
Fair points. And that's a really good point about the financial commitment. And I get that. But now tell me where you have Nebraska again. What number, like overall, do you have them sort of in your rankings?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9th. I have them 9th. So again,
that's actually not that far off where I have.
It's middle in the Big Ten. I have them behind
I'm actually
Iowa.
Surprised.
I have them behind Iowa.
Yeah.
Washington. All right, let's take a quick break there. We do need to break for our friends of the show, and then we're going to get into our tier 4, 5, and finish this out, see who kind of makes up the bottom, the dregs of the Big Ten for us, get into some comments, and then, again, what we like and don't like about the Big Ten. We're going to get into all of that coming up next on Locked On Badgers. And listen, this Rajiv and Ryan Nebraska discussion, this isn't the first time. This is not the first time we've had this, so it probably won't be the last time either on that one. But let's get into our friends of the show over at Nutrafol, new sponsors of the show. And listen, there's a reason why, besides my incredible taste in fashion, I own hats. And part of it is like I pick out great hats, but also I, at times need to look at, my thinning hair and think about maybe getting some of that back. 80% of men over the course of their lives are going to have some form of thinning hair, are going to wonder about hair regrowth. Nutrafol is that product for that. I love Nutrafol. I've started using it. They were able to send me some, and it's something that I'm really excited about to help grow back some of my hair. And you can get ahead of that thinning hair with Nutrafol. It's a #1 dermatologist recommended hair growth supplement, clinically shown to improve your hair growth, visible thickness, visible scalp coverage. Go to Nutrafol.com/men, take their hair wellness quiz, identify causes of your thinning hair, and Nutrafol will give you a personalized plan for better hair health and whole body wellness. It's not just hair, it's your whole body wellness. Take the first step to visibly thicker, healthier hair. For a limited time, Nutrafol is offering our listeners $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com/men. Enter promo code LOCKEDONCollege. Find out why more than 4,000 healthcare professionals recommend Nutrafol for healthier hair. Nutrafol.com/men. That's spelled Nutrafol.com/men. Promo code LOCKEDONCollege. Nutrafol.com/men. Promo code LOCKEDONCollege. All right, let's keep this going. Let's get Rajiv back in. Why are you laughing at me, man?
Look, we have such a great community. These comments, Uncultured Barbarian just put up a really funny comment that I enjoyed because I do the same thing. I actually shave my head willingly. Interesting, very funny.
Wait. You have a full head of hair and you're shaving it.
I do. I mean, this is me like after like a week, and then I mean, you've seen me many times on the show completely bald, and I actually do. Ever since COVID, I started doing it, and yeah, I just it's easy. I don't have to go get my hair cut. I just pick it in the shower.
That's insulting for everyone who struggles with shave. You went on Uncultured Barbarian says I'm 54, I have a full head of hair, and I shave it because I used to love you, Uncultured Barbarian. You used to be
my guy. My guy, Uncultured.
You used to be one of my favorite people. All right, let's keep going here. The comment section never lets us down on Locked On Badgers. All right, so that was my tier 3. Let me kick off tier 4, and it's going to get a little weird now because we mixed up our tiers. But
yeah.
Tier 4, I have Minnesota, Michigan State, Illinois, and Purdue. I just think that group of schools, while not dregs, and while they have had some success, I mean, Michigan State had a great run. They've just been too inconsistent, and they play second fiddle in Michigan. I struggle with their upside. Minnesota, it is what it is. Like they've beaten Wisconsin a couple times now, but they've never won the Big Ten West. They're not going to do it anytime soon. I think Fleck is fine, but he's not an elite coach. Using the word elite there, you see what I did? And Illinois and Purdue are fine. So that's my tier 4, Minnesota, Michigan State, Illinois, and Purdue.
Yeah, so for me, it's my third tier, I guess, because I realized I was muting myself. For me, Michigan State, I had, Penn State, Oregon, Wisconsin, Iowa. Then I had Michigan State, Washington, Nebraska, UCLA, then Illinois. The next tier down is Illinois, Purdue, Minnesota. I'm a little higher on Michigan State than you are. I think they've had sustained success. They beat Michigan multiple times in a row. They've definitely challenged, for the Big Ten for many, many times in many years. So I feel like they have to be up there. Washington, to me, unknown. Look, I know they're ranked 10th in the country this year. I know there's a lot of hype around Washington, but historically, this team is really not that great. They've had several down years, and they've got the occasional good quarterback, but even in the Pac-12, you've never really heard of them dominating the Pac-12 because they don't. And then Nebraska and UCLA. Nebraska, they're my 10th, so they're a little bit lower than yours. But yeah, listen, I just don't. I think Nebraska is just kind of a whatever team. And then I've got Illinois, Purdue, Minnesota. Yes, I have Minnesota 14th because I hate Minnesota, and I think they're really bad most years. Illinois, I'm getting a little bit of a bump just because Bielema has made them better. Purdue, they've gone to the Rose Bowl. I mean, they've won the Big Ten West last year. They're okay. There's kind of, but at this point, we're talking about everybody else, right? At this point, it's just kind of like the teams at the bottom.
How do you rank your bottom group? What's the ranking you have for your very last section of the
So I got Maryland, Rutgers, Northwestern, Indiana. And Indiana is just historically so bottom of the barrel. And Maryland and Rutgers, while not good, they've had kind of years where they've popped up the rankings a little bit. Indiana never really does that. Northwestern, they have had a little bit of success. I can't, say too much bad things about it, but that's where I have my bottom.
Yeah, so I went Indiana, Maryland, Rutgers, Northwestern. I think the recent couple years at Northwestern and then this Pat Fitzgerald thing, that program feels rudderless right now, but maybe that's a short-term look because you are right. They have had pop-up seasons. They're building new facilities there. So maybe I should have Northwestern a tick higher, but Z Lumosity says Rutgers is on the come up. Well, you can't go any further down. I couldn't help myself. Like, I don't know. Are they? Like, what is...
No, they're really not. Back in the old, was it Greg Schiano in its early days there, they had some success, but no, this team is, again, you have to look at it when they joined the Big Ten. Have they ever done anything in this conference? Anything? There you go.
Yeah, and they're never going to. I mean, let's just be realistic. They're not in the weight class. Let's get some comments in here. Then we're going to talk about things we like and dislike about the expansion. And we're also going to do our penultimate Big Ten original. Like, which of these 10 teams would you take if the Big Ten was stuck at 10? Who would you cut? Some of them are easy, but some of them are a little tricky. We're going to get into that as well. Robert Sorensen says, I'll be happy to finally see Wisconsin beat Oregon.
Yes,
Rajiv,
Robert. Yes.
I wanted to give this comment for you.
Listen, those 2 Rose Bowl losses stick with me. So I was at one of those games. It was just really bad. And honestly, like, so I live in Las Vegas. I think most of you know that. There are a lot of Oregonians that live here, and there's a lot of Ducks fans, and it drives me nuts. So of all those teams that have joined in on the West, that's the team that I just really want to take it to.
Yep, I like it. This one is from Matthew Berg. I hate to say it. I think Minnesota has quietly established itself in the 3rd tier. We will see how this year shapes out. They've been better. Listen, they have. I don't like Fleck. I've said that before, but I've also said his snake oil thing works kind of. Like, it appeals to a certain type of kid. It doesn't appeal to everybody, but people find it really corny. I find it corny. We're not the target audience. The target audience is a 17-year-old high school senior. Like,
I hear that, and I will say that they've got some decent sustained success recently. But you know what, Matthew? Minnesota's just never going to get any love on this show. It's never going to happen. Certainly not for me.
That's true. Joey Hanna says Penn State doesn't scare me. Should have beaten them last time.
Yeah.
Can I say this though? Like, and I'm not Joey. I agree with you. Penn State doesn't really I don't have them in the tier 1, but the should have beaten them last time or should have done this. We haven't beaten them recently or Ohio State because we haven't been as talented. That's why. I mean, that's the ball bounces the way of the talent.
But what I would say, what Joey's saying though, which I agree with him on a little bit, is okay. I know we've lost to both of those teams, but we've got pummeled by Ohio State. We literally gave games to Penn State. We absolutely were winning, and yes, we didn't close out, which is why I also have them ranked higher because we haven't done what we have to do to win those games, but. The gap is just so much closer to them than it is to anyone else.
I think it is too. Let's go here with John Berger. Bought a new house today. I just want to say congrats, John. Let's go. That's awesome. All right, let's get into more comments here, and let's get into what we like and dislike, Rajiv. What are a few things you really like about this recent set of Big Ten expansion?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, what I like it for what the Big Ten likes, which is money. Because I think that it is going to be good. I know there was some talk about, adding 2 teams. Is that just going to split the pie more? Yes, a little bit, but Fox has already stepped up and increased their number to what they're paying. And once you add those other teams, and honestly, I mean, it does make a difference. There's a reason that teams have basically been begging to get into our conference because the money's there. Jim Delaney was a visionary starting the Big Ten Network. I mean, all that stuff has really just spawned this growth of our conference, which frankly is why this super conference thing is really starting, because once we got that money going, everyone's like, oh, we need a piece of that. We need a piece of that. So that's really good. The other thing for me is just for me, West Coast trips are cool because obviously I live out West. So this is great. And honestly, there's a lot of Badger alum and Badger fans that live out West. We have a huge contingent of people, and it is nice to kind of spread that out a little bit so people can see their teams elsewhere in the country rather than having to go back to the Midwest. That's really good. Another sort of like not on the radar one that I'm really a big fan of. So the Big Ten, the CFP is going to 12 teams soon, right? And the original setup of that is 6 automatic conference champions, and then there's at-large bids, and the top 4 have buys. I think that's exactly right. But the point is that now with the Pac-12 basically disbanding, and maybe another conference following by the wayside, that's going to open up at large bids. And I think that's helpful for us, right? So the less kind of, yes, that means I know we're in a harder conference, but when we have those years where we were 5 and 6 and right on the cusp of getting into the playoff, obviously we're going to have that opportunity to get in now. And I really think that having more at large bids greatly benefits our conference and the SEC. So I want that. I like having more of our teams in there, and that will be a nice benefit to this.
Yeah, that's really well said. Here's one that I don't think people have talked about a lot, and I was thinking about this the other day. What do I really like about this? Because I've been on record, I don't really love this. I see the logic behind it, but I don't really love it. But you know what the Big Ten has done that the SEC couldn't do is branch out, right? The Big Ten has now boxed in the SEC. It's really kind of, it has that southeastern quadrant, and I mean, Texas and Oklahoma are coming. It gives them something, but the Big Ten is coast to coast. The SEC is not that. They're not going to be that. And the Big Ten has really strategically, if you're zooming out and you're looking at your chess pieces, Napoleon moving his armies around, the Big Ten has gone coast to coast. And that's something the SEC wasn't able to accomplish. And the networks absolutely love that.
Totally. And I mean, when you look at having Big Ten teams in New York, Washington, D.C., Chicago, Los Angeles, the Pacific Northwest, like that is a lot of ground covering, which, is going to drastically improve the money down the line, because now in all those markets, think about the advertising dollars that are going into that and how much more local viewership you're having on all these networks. Like the next contract that we get, the one that starts in 2030, that's going to be humongous. I mean, we're talking $70+ million right now per team per year. No other conference even sniffs that. And I love it. I love the fact that I don't love it. I'm going to get to some other things on the negative side, but I love that part of it. I think it's really exciting to be, obviously it's nice to be in the wanted place, right? Like, I don't want to be begging the Pac-12 to come let us in. I love that all those teams are like, please let us into your conference. That's pretty cool.
But here's the thing, and we can just kind of alternate between good and bad, things we like, things we don't like. I think there is a ton of positives here. Obviously, the moves don't get made if there's not a ton of positives. Really smart people, smarter than me, have been working behind the scenes to make this happen. But you mentioned it, and I like that too. I like being an apex predator in the college football food chain. That's what the Big Ten is, feeding on whatever it wants to. However, the more you add in, right, like it's like you're this exclusive community, and now suddenly you're starting to lose a little bit of that exclusivity. And I don't want to sound like I'm on my high horse or I'm arrogant, but I liked the idea that we were kind of this really, and I don't know if we're as much that anymore now that we've added all these kind of satellite campuses. I think we're losing some of what made the Big Ten the Big Ten.
I hear you, and I'll disagree with you a little bit, because I think historically there's always been talk, okay, Big Ten versus SEC. The SEC's certainly been the better conference. They've won championship year after year. And with the addition of a team like USC and Oregon, two very big, powerful football powerhouses, I think that actually does kind of help. Like, I understand what you're saying about exclusivity, but I think by adding really good teams in there, it is kind of growing that, like, the conference just innately now is more stable, and it's simply a better conference. And now at the national level, we're going to have teams in here that are high championship caliber, and there are more teams now that are at that high championship caliber. So I think that it actually makes it stronger, because frankly, we have had a lot of dead weight in the conference for a while, and we still do, and we're always going to, but now we've just increased that top end talent, which I think kind of helps the stature of the conference overall.
Do you think there's and Uncultured Barbarian says it's time to pound the snot out of Minnesota again?
Yes.
Badger Pat says we have picked up the best programs of a failing conference. The least we could do for the Pac-10 is give them Rutgers. There. They would probably take Rutgers. Bo Dragon mentioned firing guard. Bo, we're not doing that. This is even about guard today. This is a concern I have, and I have a really good friend who's a Mississippi State fan, right? And really sharp. He went to Mississippi State, really sharp college football guy. And he would always tell me, you're so lucky where you are with Wisconsin, because in the SEC, Mississippi State every year has to go through Bama, Georgia, LSU, Tennessee, etc. Is there a chance now at Wisconsin, and not just Wisconsin, the Big Ten's going to cannibalize itself a little bit? Like, we could have a really good year and finish 9-4, and then you're not making the playoffs anyway.
Well, yes, you're right. I mean, that cannibalization will happen, but you might make the playoffs because it's expanding, right? I mean, there's going to be more at large spots. So maybe, I mean, look, the SEC's been doing this for a long time, and they've consistently got multiple teams in because those losses are considered such quality in the conference. And I think the same thing will happen here. I'm okay with that, actually. I don't mind the greater competition, because it makes for much better games, more excitement throughout the season. And when you beat those teams, your stock rises very, very quickly. So I do like that. Some of the things that I don't like, one is we're not really talking about the other sports that all these schools have. Like, now think about all the travel that's required for the rowing team and all these things and various other clubs at all these schools. That's just a lot to put on these universities in general. The other thing was we just expanded. So in general, I'm with you, Ryan, that I didn't really want this to happen. I'm okay with it happening. Like, I'm glad we got them and others didn't. So I'm glad that in the end we got USC, we got Oregon. But I think that in general, I'm just like, we just expanded with these two other teams. We didn't need to do it right away. I kind of liked the idea of just, let's hang out for a little bit. Let's see how this goes. Do we like having the West Coast team? Does it work for us? But right now we're just going full in, and that's just what we have now. So that's kind of That's kind of my back and forth on it. In general, I would prefer that we stay and then we get them later. I just didn't want to happen now. But if it was going to break up, we kind of had to do it.
Yeah, and I had a similar take, and I had some people kind of point out sometimes you just have to take advantage of a fire sale, right? Like if I have, let's say I have a car and I'm not looking for a new one, but I walked by a dealership and they said, "Hey, I got to get rid of this thing. I'm 75% off. I might just get it because why not?" Right. And it's kind of like Oregon and Washington. It's a fire sale. You got them at pennies on the dollar. Again, to me, it felt like the Big Ten is in such a catbird spot that no matter what they did, they were going to be able to cherry pick at some point. And I just, to your point, and I agreed with this, I didn't know if we needed to do this right now, but I think it's a valid counterpoint to that you weren't going to get a deal on Oregon and Washington like this again. And to counter or to add on to what you're saying about the other sports, now this adds scheduling flexibility for those 4 West Coast schools instead of 2. They're going to be able to have more teams on the West Coast to play. So I get it. I think the Big Ten was just being very opportunistic, which, listen, the Big Ten has been good at that.
Mm-hmm. I will say one thing that I really hope the Big Ten takes time in thinking about is the scheduling, because I said on this show I was really, really impressed with the Flex Protect Plus, which is what they ended up choosing. And so every team got to, protect what they wanted between 1 and 3 teams. So we obviously chose 2 for Minnesota and Iowa. And then some teams protected 3, some teams protected 1, and then they just filled in the rest. And you played every team in the conference within 2 years. I loved that. I thought that was the very clever way to do the scheduling. Now we have 2 more teams. I don't really know what that's going to look like. Maybe it's going to have to go to a 3-year cycle. I really just hope that teams get to protect who they want, right? Like, that's important because we don't want to, we want to protect Minnesota and Iowa. It doesn't mean we want to protect anybody else. And Minnesota wants to protect however many trophy games they have. I know they're protecting 3. And if UCLA and USC only want to do 1, I like that. And I hope they can really sit down and figure out how to make it work with Oregon and Washington in this system, because it's very clever. I do not want to have a situation where we don't play a team for 6 years. That to me is not interesting. Let's get you should be able to play all these teams within a couple or 3 years. I really hope the Big Ten makes that work.
Yep, I agree with that. Commandant Klink says SEC, Big Ten are going to dominate the 12-team playoff. I think that's very.
I mean, really, we're heading towards AFC, NFC, SEC, Big Ten. I mean, that's basically what's going to happen at some point.
This is a really good take, Rajiv. And you know what? I don't think we're going to get into who's going to make your original Big Ten. Like if you just cut out 10, that would be another show because there's so many good comments I want to get to. This is from Kyle Matry. This is a good point. It's an interesting point. Just because we make a 12-team playoff doesn't increase our chances at winning a natty. It's interesting in the sense that in the previous playoffs, if you weren't good enough to be in that top 4, you really didn't deserve to be in the discussion for the most part anyway. If you finish 8th, let's say, and you get into this 12-team playoff, I mean, obviously you have a better chance of winning because you're in the dance, but you're still probably at a serious talent disadvantage against the Ohio States, Alabamas, Georgias. It makes the road easier because it's more inclusive, but it makes it harder because in a way you're going to have to go through 3 matchups, a couple blue bloods. I don't know if it helps our chances realistically.
Fair point, because I mean, certainly you're right. You're in it. You obviously have a chance because any given day you can beat these teams. But yeah, you have to beat more of them. So if you were in it before, you only had to win 2 games. Now you've got to win 3 or 4, and that does complicate things. I think it ultimately does increase it, and because we're just in it. But frankly, even if it doesn't increase it, Kyle, I just want to be a part of it. Like I'm desperate to have the feeling that we had in 2015 when the Badgers were in the national championship for the basketball program and how crushing that was. But it was really cool to say that we went to 2, back-to-back Final Fours and we really were there for the title. And I know that, maybe we don't win the championship anytime soon. But if we get into that 12 team, how much more exciting does that really make everything? And the fact that we're talking about a coach that can get us there, I think it's great. And so I do think it helps our chances, but I just want to be a part of it. I just want to be a part of it.
Yeah, I'm there with you. I enjoy the expansion, right? There's 130-ish Division I teams to try to have a playoff with 4 in a sport with so few games is absolutely ludicrous. So
nuts.
The more the better, and you get a chance to get home playoff games. Are you kidding me?
I know. Locked on Badgers live from the home playoff game.
Dude, it would be insane. I love this comment from Badger Pat. So thankful for Chris McIntosh. Can you imagine what we would look like without the changes made at the end of last year? we would be eating dust with the addition of the new schools. I think that last sentence, Rajiv, to me is because the Big Ten is rapidly evolving and it's rapidly getting better. It's rapidly getting more competitive. And Paul Chryst, honestly, again, we've done this a million times, and it's not to put any more dirt on that grave, but he was rapidly going in the other direction.
Yeah, this is a really good point. I mean, yeah, that last sentence is really clear because what would we be talking about? I mean, I would be shaking thinking about having to play Oregon and USC now. And then like all of a sudden, because before we were challenging for the Big Ten, we were in the conference championship several times, mainly because we were in the easier West, but we were there and we were talked about. But if we kept Paul Chryst, we wouldn't be talked about. We would not for the next, let's say if he was here for another 3 years, we would not be talked about for the next 3 years with, can we win the conference? Can we potentially have this, outside chance of an undefeated season? None of that stuff would happen. So this changes everything. The Luke Fickell era times up perfectly. And you're right, Chris McIntosh, we've given him a ton of credit on this show. He deserves all of it. And yeah, I mean, I don't know if that was the calculus for him. And I'm sure that he obviously knew that the Big Ten is changing and the college football landscape is what's changing. And he was out in front of it and put us in a position now where we can challenge for the Big Ten moving forward any given year based on the fact that look at how many 10 4-star recruits next year already. Yeah. I mean, that wasn't happening under Paul Chryst. So we've already seen this huge increase. Every single way you look left, you look right, you look forward, any place you look in this program, it is improved. And that is impressive. And that is how you turn a average to above average program into a potential national championship program. Believe, maybe.
That is, Rajiv, I love you, man. That is awesome. The other thing it does, it gives you confidence going forward that you have a young, dynamic leader at the top of your organization that whatever changes, because listen, NIL is not done changing, adapting. College sports landscape is not done changing and adapting. It gives you confidence with the Chris McIntosh that you have a dynamic leader at the top of your organization that is forward thinking, that is dynamic, that is willing to make tough choices and tough changes. It gives you a lot of confidence going forward as a Badger fan across the entire breadth of Wisconsin sports.
If you're not evolving, you're going backwards, and if you're not moving forward, you're going back. And you can't just stand still and keep the status quo. And he just threw a wrench into everything and said, we're doing things differently, we're doing things my way, and it's been incredible.
Kyle said, don't like this new Big Ten. Final year of college football as we know it, going to soak in every second of this final year of sanity.
It's tough. I mean, it is tough to look at everything that's going on with college football and the changes that are happening. Look, I mean, I've said many times that I've loved the Big Ten. I'm a huge Big Ten, apologist. I defend the Big Ten a lot, and it is changing, but the evolution is happening, and whether we like it or not, we got to be part of it. And at least we have a coach that's going to take us forward. I think in the end, we will end up liking it because the matchups are going to be really cool. I mean, look, every other year, maybe every year for a few years, we're going to be going out to USC. We're going to be playing USC. We're going to play Oregon. I mean, I think there's going to be such cool matchups. And then it does, if we win the conference, it means that much more because now we beat it with these extra teams in it, which is great. So I agree to an extent, Kyle. I think it is, it is changing. It's not as fun right away because everything we've known is different. But in the end, I think we're gonna take to it pretty well.
Yeah. This one here from Matthew Berg. Ryan would find a way to delude us into thinking there was hope with BC. I couldn't even pull that off. Like, there's no way.
Nor could believe over here. No way. There was nothing to believe about what was going on last year.
Listen, if you listen to that show or if you were listening to the BuckyCast, I was hypercritical about the recruiting stuff. I was hypercritical about Joe, the coaching hires, the in-game decision making. Listen, I thought Paul Chryst did things well, and I mentioned that, but I was pretty vocal about some issues there. But I didn't think Chris McIntosh would fire him either. That was a stunning move to me. Let's see, Rajiv. Let's see. What is this from Robert? Any word on the camp versus Locked On Badgers? Are y'all too scared? I don't even know what this comment means.
Listen, the camp is a great show. We like those guys. Those guys do good work.
Yeah, like sports content. I've said this before, and I've said this to Rajiv and Justin. It should be like a buffet. There's room for everybody. There's different types of things to eat. Like that. That's the whole goal of this show. Like we had Scary on, and we tried to pump up his podcast because I love it. We've done that with everybody who comes on, the Badger Notes guys. So I'm all about go listen to all the content you can get and enjoy it. Like, I would rather none of it be a competition, quite frankly. So that's where I'm at. Tyler Straber says, every time I hear Fickle talk, it makes me want to run through a wall for the guy.
So true. I mean, I smile like this every single time I hear him talk. And frankly, same way with Phil Longo and Tressel. Those guys are great to listen to as well. Yeah, I'm just, this guy has me so excited. I can't even, it's, what are we, like 16 days away, something like that? I don't know what it is. Oh man, it's going to be fantastic.
Let's get a couple more quick comments in here. Mitch James says, Chris McIntosh is the Don. Rajiv, if you see any comments that you want to throw up here too, let me know. Let's see. Comment on Clink says, being a part of the playoff will be exciting. Yes, it'll be tough to win, but that's why we have to up our recruiting game a bit. I think we are on the right track to have a chance to do it. It's a solid, like, listen, you do, at the end of the day, Commandant's right. We're playing to win a championship. I mean, that's the bottom line. And there's no easy roads to championships, right? So there's a tough road if you're going to win a title. Getting in a Big 12, our Big 10, 12-team playoff. I'm getting all my conferences in this lingo, but getting in a 12-team playoff, that's going to be hella difficult to win that. But that's what we're doing. That's why we're invested. That's why we're here. So
yeah, totally. A good comment from Matthew Berg here, not at the bottom, but kind of near it, 835. Matthew Berg says attitudes on the expansion will be based on results. Teams that get more shine because of the competition will love it. Middle teams ground into irrelevance will hate it. I think that's a fair point. I mean, because look, these teams that we put at the bottom tiers, they are not happy about this. They have to face a much more stiff competition. And frankly, teams that were in the West with us that weren't winning the West every year, but at least they had chances, like Purdue, Northwestern, they've all won the West at some point. And those teams now, I mean, can you just imagine sitting in Northwestern's shoes, especially with their coach just being gone, Purdue, Indiana, looking up at these other, this 18-team conference thinking, how are we ever going to win it? I mean, we're worried about it too with who we have. Those teams at the bottom are really in trouble.
Well, and then you think about the Washington States and Oregon States. I mean, at least those teams in the bottom of the Big Ten have a seat at the table.
They're at least in the Big Ten. They're getting that $70 million.
Washington and Oregon State are off on a life raft somewhere, like the USS Pac-12 sank. A couple of the guys got saved, and they just left Oregon State and Washington State out on a life raft, hoping to get picked up by the trade winds. Like, that's a disaster for those programs. Z Luminosity says, and thank you for the comment, Z. Scruggs got to step up the D-line recruiting. Only thing holding us back. That's 100% exclamation point true. Like, we're not winning any national title unless defensive line recruiting gets better or defensive line development, one or the other, likely both.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly need the pass rushing. We need those guys in the middle to do that. It'll be interesting to see how the D-line is used this year. How is it going to look different than what we've seen in the past, and what do we really need there? But look, I've always said this many times. I think that I believe in what Luke Fickell is doing. I think he has a plan, and I think he's going to kind of see what we have this year. They're going to tailor their recruiting, and they're already stepping up huge in the 24 class, starting things off early in 25. I think that they're really in a good spot, and this will happen. I have I don't lack any, I'm totally confident that this D-line will get better and all these positions are going to get better because recruiting is doing nothing but sitting on an upward trajectory.
Can I put on my Believe with Rajiv cap for 1 second?
Yes.
Listen, I agree we need to get better there, but Jamel Howard was a huge win already. That's a huge win. That's a guy that LSU was after, Miami was after, and then Darian Varner I think is a big transfer win. So and I think I saw that comment already in your Tim. You're underrating Varner and Howard. Yeah, Tim, you and I are on the same wavelength here. Those are already two big wins. Now he needs to stack more. But you look at the pedigree of defensive linemen that were visiting Madison, right? Those are the right kind of guys you got to get on campus. Now, you have to close them, but we weren't even getting that pedigree of guy before, typically. Multiple high-level guys on campus. And again, landing Varner, landing Howard, I think those are two positive notches in the belt. So I'm not that worried about it. I think recruiting is going to go up. I just wonder what's the ceiling of defensive line recruiting at Wisconsin? Like, there's only so much you can do, right? You're never going to recruit. I don't care who you are, and I don't care if I'm wearing my Believe hat. You're never going to recruit defensive linemen like Clemson or Ohio State or Alabama or Georgia. But how close to that? How much of that gap can you close? That's the question.
Listen, I don't believe I'm done putting a ceiling on anything that Fickell can do. There's no ceilings. Why can't we recruit like that? I mean, in basically half a cycle, this guy has brought in 10 4-star. This is his first full cycle next year. 10 4-stars already. who's to say that 3 years from now he's not recruiting with teams like Georgia and Ohio State? I mean, I know that's a stretch. I know that's out there, but there is no reason to believe that he has a recruiting ceiling. I truly believe that.
And listen, that's what Kyle said too. Kyle said if our receiver room improved the way it did, there's no reason defensive line can't. Give it some time. Rajiv, you said who's to say they won't? I am. But
yes,
but my
you
voice,
also say they have no chance to win a national.
But listen, my voice doesn't matter, right? Like, I would be thrilled to be wrong on this. To be super clear, like I think there are NIL and fundamental differences at those schools that Wisconsin is never going to bridge that gap. I would love to be wrong. Absolutely love to be wrong. All right, I think we'll wrap it up there. Get a Bo Dragon comment on here. Imagine if they lose to Buffalo. Like what? Like just walking around with like a rain cloud over your head, Bo. Come on now.
I mean, Bo, you're right. I mean, if that happens, we are going to be really, really sad. That's going to be yikes. I have one thing I want to just add in here that's a little off topic to end the show. I'm sure you all saw Clay Cundiff's note about medical retirement. I just want to give a shout out to Clay Cundiff. I mean, that guy's been through a lot. 2 season-ending injuries with us. He was really good when he was on the field. The fact that he put that great note out there, talking about how many season-ending injuries he's had and how rough it's been, and his body just can't keep up the pace of the game. Look, this guy I hope that over the next few years he becomes a great ambassador for our program. He stays connected to Wisconsin football. Would love to see him maybe get into coaching. I mean, I hope that guy. I hope we haven't seen the last of him, because what a guy, what class. Really feel bad for him and everything that he went through, and then we couldn't really see him on the field much. But I just wanted to give a shout out to him. I thought that note was great, and I really wish him all the best.
That is very, very well said. A great way to end it. On Wisconsin, Commandant Klink, Rajiv, Tim, Bo, John, Tyler, everybody that tuned in. You guys are amazing as always. Thank you so much. Really do appreciate it. Let's see if I can nail this outro without being too awkward. On Wisconsin, and we'll talk again tomorrow.